Say hi to the group, Patrick.
Hey, what's up, group? I'm sorry. I'm here 30 seconds late, but in the house.
Yes.
Glad to have everybody to join us on this beautiful Monday. I'm in Dallas, Texas. Beautiful and hot and humid. I
Yes.
was out earlier, now I'm back inside work.
I'm here in Washington, D.C., finishing up the ALA, American Library Association conference, getting ready to travel back to up north.
Why don't you go and talk about that, Tiff, while we wait for Bakari, tell our folks about ALA. What does that ALA stand for?
So it's the American Library Association. It's the professional organization for librarians, and we get together usually in the wintertime and annually in the summer to discuss the policies and things that are happening. And what I can tell you, which is interesting in terms of things that are going on that are of interest, I attended a session in terms of libraries and the incarcerated. And I heard from a lot of librarians who are doing incredible things to make sure that imprisoned folks have access to literacy. They're updating their standards to be sure that they match technologically and in terms of outreach to create better standards. So that was one thing that I attended that I thought was incredibly powerful. And a lot of people do not realize how much public libraries especially, but imprisoned librarians, not imprisoned librarians, but librarians who work in prisons, how much they do to ensure that people have literacy. So that was incredible. Also got to walk around the conference hall, and there was a lot more presentations that related to young Black males and literacy, which I appreciated. There was a lot more Black male authors that I saw, which was also amazing. And a lot more representation in terms of diversity in young children's literature, generally speaking, which I thought was amazing. So those are some of the highlights that I saw. There's still one of the issues, I'm a part of Policy Corps. One of the issues that we're still dealing with is school librarians and public librarians and book banning, especially in states like Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma. So those are big issues, and how can we protect and support librarians? I think they have a United for Books campaign that you could be a part of. If you're interested, please do, please join the campaign to stop the banning of books. So that was going on. And also things like digital equity in terms of, as we learned in COVID, getting the proper internet to minoritized folks so that they have access to internet. So the digital equity bill is passed, and states will start getting their money, and that was something else that happened as well.
But in terms of you being a Black librarian, how is that important to you to attend a conference like that? Because you go annually if you can, but why as a Black librarian you go to the American Library Association conference?
You get to see the latest of what's happening in terms of outreach, services, technology, thought, all those things that are happening within the profession, and that people come together nationally. It's kind of almost like a brain trust in terms of sharing and things of that matter of fact. There was another session I attended that talked about voter registration and not doing it as a 2-week right before thrust, but we need to grow these youth to be participants in the system instead of just that 2 weeks before. We need to think about local elections more, and how the librarians and libraries can support that more. So it was really a lot of social justice and political issues going on as we see things going across the news, and it's just basically how it's affecting libraries.
Yeah. We said earlier, we seem to forget about the importance of libraries. Particularly now, we should really pay close attention We're talking about the banning of books, and we're talking about the CRT, critical race theory. How that is, of course, you're going to play a role in how libraries are being looked at. So we talk about freedom of press, all the freedoms we have in this country. We see what's happening now, particularly around books, and me and you both being advocates for reading and writing. This is a very interesting time. We better pay attention. Gotta pay attention, folks. Hey, we are here in Seoul. Is Bakari Kitwana. What's up, brother?
How you doing today?
Yep.
Hey, Bakari, how you doing?
Hey, Tiffany, how are you?
Good to see you. It's been a long time. Good to see you.
In a minute.
I know. We done grew old, okay?
Yeah, older.
We was kids out here.
Older, that's all.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bakari, we're glad to have you on. It's Black Music Month, and this project that me and Tiffany have been working together. How long has it been now, Tiffany? It hasn't been a year, has it?
Not even next month and August will be the first year.
Okay, so we definitely got to do a 1-year celebration, something wild and funky and crazy for this project. But the project Bakari is designed to let young brothers understand that there's a literary space for them out here. They can come to this video blog and blog and see books and information that is going to empower them. And that's why I'm so happy Tiff got to be a part of it. Her rich and deep knowledge of books forward about Black children. And so this is focused on Black boys. So I'm excited about what's happening, and she asked me to be a part of it. So hey, we're kind of working it. And one part of it is what we're about to do now, is have conversations with people like yourself who clearly understand the importance of Black literature. And at this point in time, doing Black Music Month. I almost thought that people forgot about Black Music Month. They've seen everything else being promoted, but it's like, y'all, what's up with promoting Black Music Month?
Well, people distracted with Juneteenth, I think.
Yeah. Juneteenth.
Whole lot of other stuff going on in the world.
Pride Month, all of that. So,
White supremacists.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
The making of a Nazi regime.
Yes.
Okay.
Democrats sitting on the sideline watching it happen, making like they mad.
Pretending.
Over nonsense.
Pretending. So, Tiff, you want to go and delve into it, as we kind of have a conversation with Bakari about Black Music Month. I know, Bakari, I want to talk to you a little bit, about how we kind of connected and our work with Third World Press. But since we're talking about Black music, I told Tiffany we can go ahead and really just get into it. We're all lovers of hip hop music, but I'm from the South, so I'm a soul music man. So I'm gonna let you two share some conversation about the work that you've done over the years. Excellent work. I was trying to pull my books on my shelf. I need to remind me to organize my bookshelf, and I was trying to find your books and pull them. And the only one I found was white kids love hip hop.
Okay.
I got all these books. All these books in my house, and it's like, I need to organize them. They should I need to organize them because I got hip hop generation and others that I need to and rap this game. I need to pull that. I just couldn't find them. I should have looked for it earlier today.
I got some new stuff too.
Yeah, all you do stuff.
This one out, Democracy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unchained. And the Rakim book.
Rakim book.
I have it here, but I don't have it close enough to grab.
Let's talk about that. Tell us about that project, please.
Oh my goodness. It was an enormous project. It came from out of nowhere. But when I finally connected with Rakim, it was just a good marriage. It was a history that I knew because I grew up, living that history. I'm a few years older than Rakim, believe it or not. Rakim was in high school when his first songs were released. He was already getting ready to go to college, but he had not yet graduated high school. I believe it was his junior year going into his senior year. The first few songs blew up so crazy that they had opportunities to go on tour, him and Eric B. And so he was presented with the obstacle of dropping out of high school, which of course his mother didn't want him to do. He also was interested in playing football in college, and I believe he had gotten he was on his way to college to play football. And then the rap thing just kind of jumped off. And so that is a part of the story, but we linked up. We started with some intense conversation. He wanted the publisher wanted a memoir about his life in the music industry. That's not what he wanted though. He wanted a memoir about his creative process. And so I tried to strike a balance between what the publisher wanted and what he wanted, and gave them a little bit of both. And so that was kind of, but it was such a rich project. Rakim knew what he wanted to say, but he needed a glass. He didn't know he needed a glass. He needed a glass to put it into, you know what I mean? And so that was really my role. My role was to give him a canister to fit his brilliance into. He didn't need any help telling, he didn't need any help telling his story. You know what I'm saying? He told the story flawlessly because he lived it and he was passionate about it. But we just kind of went back and forth, you know, just kind of digging deeper. So he talked about the creative process. We wanted to make sure his music was prominently in the book. And so there was a lot of conversation about, you know, the creative process around particular songs, his creative process in general. And it was magical. I bet. Yeah, it was magical. I was honored to be a part of it. It was just a magical process because I lived that political history, and to be able to, and Rakim was such an important figure for us. You know, I graduated from high school in 84. His first music came out in 86. And so I was just a junior in college when that stuff was coming out. And I remember all that stuff like it was yesterday. And we both grew up in Long Island. So we also had like that Long Island history, and I knew the terrain. So that also made it easier. So like I knew how long it took to get from Manhattan to where he lived. You know what I'm saying? I knew the different highways that you could take. And so we wrote all of that that context into the book. So
I was gonna say, what did you learn about his young life? Because I think a big part of this is some of the conversation that I'm interested in is we know a lot of our young brothers are interested in becoming MCs, you know, and you know, there's a space for that because there's a voice, but we have to funnel that, you know, like and create context for that voice. But like when you look at somebody like the R, like what was his young life like? I mean, he has a background, he's Muslim, he's his rhyme scheme is incredible, his voice, like where does all that knowledge come from? Was he a reader? Like what was his situation? Yeah. You said he was going to college. We don't hear this. Right.
So he was a reader. I think because once he got into the 5% Nation, knowledge was just essential. And so he's studying the Quran, he's studying the Bible, he's studying other religious texts, he's studying the Torah. And a lot of that is coming into the writing, but you know, the 5% Nation and their teachings prominent in his work, and also his parents. He was from a really strong family. His father was into music and had a music collection, like a lot of MCs. Their first real orientation towards music was their parents' music collection. And so his parents would have get-togethers, and their friends would come over and they would play all this old music. And so like he's listening to this music as a kid. The other thing was his mom had a friend who was like her best friend, and he called her his aunt. I don't believe she was related to him though. And this sister is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So she was a musician, and her orientation towards music deeply influenced him. And so one of the things that he wanted to make sure was present in the book was she had a routine for how she would get dressed and prepared on the day of a show. And he brought that into his routine. The other thing about Rakim that was fascinating was he was a saxophone player as a young person. You know, back in our day,
Yeah.
the way you play instruments. I mean, it
You
wasn't
couldn't
even
have a bridge without a saxophone.
That's
right.
That's right. And so Rakim was a saxophone player. His older brother was also a saxophone player, one of his older brothers. And one of his older brothers also was I think a keyboardist, and he went on tour with Curtis Blow. So he had all of this kind of musical stuff happening around him, and he brought all that into the music. The other thing that happened with him that was fascinating was what he talks about in the book, how he first ended up with a producer who was very knowledgeable. I can't think of what his name was right now at the top of my head. But this producer and sound engineer taught him a lot. So he talks about one time when I think it was the Grammys, and Eric B left to go to the Grammys. They still had a song to finish. So he talks about how he actually mixed this last song, but a lot of that orientation came from, you know, spending close time with this producer. Also, Eric B had a brother who would come into the studio with them, and he really trusted Eric B's brother to kind of like, you know, you'd be like, yo, that song is done. Like you don't need to do nothing else. And so he kind of looked to him. So he talks about that also. So all of that and more. But back to the saxophone thing, he was fascinated with the saxophone, and he was fascinated with jazz music, and he was fascinated with John Coltrane. And one of the things he talks about is that John Coltrane once had played a note that was basically playing two notes at once. And no one else had ever done this. And so that was the beginning of the way he started to think about rapping. How could he rap like John Coltrane played the saxophone? And that went into his orientation, which really transformed the lyrical process of rap music. It was a combination of that, as well as a combination of the 5% Nation and the emphasis on knowledge, to the point in which a lot of people don't know this, but Chuck D and Public Enemy were finishing an album. I think they had finished it. And then he heard the album by Eric B, Paid in Full. He went back and said, we got to do the whole album over again. This is Chuck D. Because he said the face of hip hop has been transformed.
What I see is interesting is because I was just reading this article about Nas or whatever, is that they have this jazz background, they have this cultural identity that's very much affirmed. And, you know, so like that gave them like a great foundation to like go out. They were writers, they were readers, they were like, they had a sense of history and self that was kind of like a springboard for everything they did. And I know like Nas was influenced by Rakim's style and everything. So it's very interesting to see these similarities in that era, because even if you look at like De La Soul and Tribe and everybody else, all our parents' records is all that jazz, all that stuff that we had, like you could see the influence in there. Because I was like, oh my dad, there's word errors, like there's this, you could, inevitably that's our parents' music influence is what played out on us. What does it look like for like us? Like my kids listen to, like all these hip hop artists. Like, how did that play into where we are now? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I got to think about that. You made me think about something else while you were talking.
Speak on it.
One of the other things that Rakim talks about in the book was that his father was very witty with language. And so he would say things that were just very, very witty, very creative. and he brought that into the rhyming as well. It's an important point. You know, he talked about his father once telling him something like, you know, he's like, Dad, I need some money, blah, 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 blah. He's like, well, you better squeeze that money till the green come on. So he talks about these things that his father would say. His father just had a way with words also. So you mentioned Nas. Nas emerges in 90, what is it, 90, is it 91 or 94? 90,
I don't
94?
know. Like,
I don't remember. What year was Illmatic?
let me look here. I thought it was, let me look here real quick.
I can't remember.
91?
I think it is 91 for some reason, but I could be wrong.
It couldn't have been 93. It had to have been 91.
Maybe it was 94.
Let me see.
Because I think that,
Was it?
yeah, maybe it was not. Maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe it was not.
It says well, it says release date 94. So there you go.
Okay, 94. I thought it was 94. And the reason I thought it was 94 was that was the time I was preparing to go to the Source magazine. So it was very prominent in my mind. Nas was one of the artists that I actually wrote about in pitching to the Source why I should be the editor.
Put a bookmark into and explain later on about what it was like to hear that album off the rip for the first time.
Yeah. So yeah, so Nas definitely himself, you know, his own 5% journey was influenced by the lyricism of Rakim and many others. Busta Rhymes, who's also a 5%er, Mobb Deep, their lyricism influenced by the Wu-Tang Clan. So it's a long history of artists, Brand Nubian, Poor Righteous Teachers. All these artists were influenced by what Rakim was doing, and then others who weren't 5%er, but Nation of Islam leaning, like Ice Cube and Public Enemy and others. But you said the music. I'm trying to capture this question.
Yeah, because did we mess up, right? Because we had this great depth of information. I mean, we had R&B, blues, soul, we had all this, and then we was so hip hop. Like, is this us? Is this our blueprint?
I mean, I think the other thing that we had that people often forget, what dovetailed with the 5% knowledge that came out of the Nation of Islam, and some of which came out of the Black Power movement, was also the Afrocentricity movement, not just within the academy, but also within the street, which gave rise to Black Studies departments. So that was happening. You had people selling books on the street. You had the African people buying African medallions and wearing them in hip hop. So all of that African-centered consciousness that came out of the Black Power movement began to work its way into hip hop. People like Queen Latifah, which also came shortly after Rakim. I want to say her first album was late 80s, 87, 88 or 89, somewhere in there. And so she also is another person. So we had all of these influences that are coming out of the Black Power movement, in addition to the music. And for this is the other thing, our generation of hip hop music was a generation that came, the basis of most of the early hip hop albums were songs we already knew. Yeah. So it wasn't like we were hearing this. I mean, that was a part of his power. Yeah. So when you heard, Encore by Cheryl Lynn, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever, Kanye sampled Shaka Khan, you know what I'm saying? Through the fire, his song was Through the Wire. Like these are songs we knew. So, or when we heard James Brown beat, we knew this music.
Yes.
So when we heard Cameo, or we heard Mtume, right? This is music that we knew already.
That's true. That's true.
So it wasn't a leap. We were already dancing to this music in the basement parties, in the nightclubs, kinda. We were still kind of young. We were too young almost to be in the clubs. We were sneaking in. But we
Right.
That
was
wasn't
dancing
me
to this
though. If
music.
my dad's watching, that wasn't me. That was them.
Right, we was dancing to this music at birthday parties, at graduation parties, at weddings.
In the parks.
That's right, and it was DJ driven. So what we saw happen was young people starting to get on the mic and rap over the hooks to these beats. You know what I'm saying? Over the break beat. What DJ Kool Herc isolated as his contribution to hip hop. We're dancing already to this music. We hear that break beat, and the MCs at the parties are starting to rap over this. And so all of this kind of dovetails into where we are. So I think that's something that was different. By the time we get to the more contemporary era, you have a whole lot of legalese has entered into the game. And you got to get sample clearance and all this other stuff. People start making their own beats so they can avoid, having to get the sample clearance and all this stuff. And I think all of that kind of plays a role. I don't think that it, and also the music industry becomes more centered on making money.
That's true.
Like, this is the thing. The music industry could make money off of hip hop in the beginning because they didn't invest that much money in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like they would invest very little, and the artists did all the work. And then they made this huge windfall of cash because they had already paid out so little to begin with. They weren't really paying for all this other stuff. But as it becomes more of an industry, they're paying for more and more stuff. And so now the whole formula is forced to change. Mm-hmm. And so also you start to get a different type of artist. And what Jay-Z said when I interviewed him, he's like, look, most people, when they heard a true MC like a Rakim, they knew they couldn't do that. Mm. But when they heard, just somebody making some noise while the song was playing, they're like, well, I can't rap, but I can do that. That's what those were his words. I can do that. And so I feel like we started to get this kind of dumbed down, and I really feel we moved away from that. Like, there are fundamentals of hip hop that were a part of the definition of hip hop that are no longer the definition of hip hop for a new generation. One of which was lyricism.
But one of the Beastie, and granted it's the Beastie Boys, but one of them was saying that, like, it has to innovate itself. Where do we support them versus where do we say y'all need to maybe look back, like we had a music history, like maybe y'all need to look back at some of this. So where's the support for them? And then where's the mentorship of, hey, look at this, look at this over here. Maybe this can add to this.
I feel like there's a little bit of all of that going on. There's a book out right now by Wise Intelligent, one of the artists with Poor Righteous Teachers. The book is called 3/5 of an MC, playing on the 3/5 of a man. Right. Which I think is brilliant. I mean, the brother was always brilliant, but I mean, he knocked it out the park with that. And then Talib has a new book out called Vibrate Higher. Mm-hmm. And in this book, he talks about a lot of his own history and his own evolution within hip hop, and his evolution as an MC, his evolution within music, and his history of his family. But he also talks about what you're saying. We've got to give the music the chance to evolve and not feel like we can hold it in a box. And so Talib says, he listens to a lot of the stuff. He's like, some of it's good. You gotta expand your ear. But what's, to me, as I look at it, and I'm working on a book on Nipsey Hussle now, and I'm looking at these evolutions within the music, and the music that what we loved about hip hop is not what this generation of young people love about hip hop. And I think that that's an important starting point. Explain they don't that. Love what we love. We love the lyricism. We love the intellect. We love the wittiness. We love the originality. All of those things, and we love the beats. Yep. All of those things were a part of hip hop for us. And I feel like as a new generation has evolved, and as the music has changed, the changes within the music industry, the changes within hip hop journalism, which used to talk back and engage the art in a different kind of way, the moving of a lot of that stuff to the periphery, the rise of different ways of making music, selling music online, people buying singles through live streams instead of buying entire albums. Like the concept album drove hip hop in our era. The rise and evolution of the mixtape, all of these things affect the way in which music is now heard. And I also think that for our generation, hip hop was an end all be all. We saw hip hop first, many of us, in the park. It wasn't a mainstream media manifestation. It was off the radar culture. It was culture that we lived. I remember one of the first times I got on the turntables was my cousin who lived 2 doors down from me is playing music in his garage. And I could hear the music, and I walked down his house and I see he's got these turntables. Like that was my first like up close experience, with hip hop. And I feel like for a generation that's not experiencing hip hop like that, they're experiencing it as a mainstream cultural phenomenon that's global. It's just a different reality for them. And I think we got to give them room to experience it how they experience. The hope, I think, is that they'll invent something new. I think that they kind of already have, but they still call it hip hop, which is another topic. That's another topic for another day.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Uh-oh,
Okay. So it's beyond the 4 elements, right? Or 5, some people say, so it's beyond that. Yeah.
I think
You're
that they've created something different. I think that they're able to, we don't really see a hip hop artist, in my opinion, that's really rock star level mainstream American culture until Tupac.
But they
we started to see a little bit with, I think we started to see it a little bit with Run DMC, but I think it was something different by the time we started to see a little bit with Snoop, then Snoop had the murder case, but then with Tupac, it's really, hip hop is really mainstream culture. And you got a generation of young, even white kids that are like, this is fascinating. You know what I'm saying? Like the level of fascination with Tupac, in my opinion, is radically different than Run DMC, because Run DMC wasn't as in your face radical.
You think it would have been Run DMC because I see a lot of young folks reference Tupac. I don't see it in the music. They're like on some next level Black funk craft work type. You know what I mean? Like I can't explain it, but it's like some techno computer generated sounds and things. You know what I mean?
It's a lot of different things that are going on. You got now music being sold on TikTok, and that was never like you didn't have hip hop songs, quote unquote, breaking on anything other than somebody within hip hop said it was hot. But so everything, the whole playbook, I think, has been rewritten, and I think that people are experiencing it different, and we got to let them experience it how they experience it. But I do think that we have to be more brash about saying this ain't the hip hop that we grew up with. What y'all call hip hop is not what we call hip hop.
Where does literature have a place in this? Like, how can we look at our literature? How can we look at your stuff you've written? How do you bring that to them as, how does this, how does this resonate with you? I mean, even if we reject this, write about rejecting it. You know what I mean? But at least give me some examples. You know what I mean?
I feel like one of the things that happened with us as a generation is that we were so centered on recognizing hip hop as youth culture that we continue to let it be youth culture, even when we weren't the youth anymore. So I feel like that's one of the things that happen. Like, and I also feel like we as a people are so always anxious for a new generation of activism to emerge that sometimes as it is emerging, we are not as critical of it as we should be. And I feel like that is a mistake that we all made with Black Lives Matter. And I think some of the problems that has happened with that movement, you know, is a result of that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
explain a little more.
See, I'm sorry.
Can you explain that a little more?
Well, I think that if you're going to come into a Black conscious movement, you should be nurtured, I believe, into those movements. You can't teach yourself the history of movements. I mean, you can study the history of movements, but studying is only one part of it. The other part of it is being in conversation with elders who lived it. And I feel like when you have that disconnect then you kind of, when you have a disconnect from elders, you kind of don't have accountability.
Did we do that? Did our elders do that? Did we do that? Did our youth do that?
I'm talking, I think it's a combination. I mean, if young people don't want to be mentored, you can't force yourself on them.
There you
But
go.
I think that if you're a young person and you're engaging in an activist movement, you have to recognize that our movement goes back, you know, to our arrival in this country. And you have to understand the roots on which you're standing, and you got to understand the movement intricately, because if you don't understand these movements intricately, you're going to make huge mistakes. And I think that's something that we're seeing. I mean, I don't want to get into it too much.
Right, I feel you on that.
When you talk about movements, Bakari, why don't you talk for our audience? When you say movement, what movements are you talking about? Be specific, if you don't mind.
I mean, we go all the way back to the movements of Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey. I mean, these were movements of people trying to get free. You go back to the Garvey years. You can go back to the Niagara movement. You go back to the civil rights and the Black Power movement. All of these were movements created by a specific generation to say, this is the reality that we're facing in our time, and this is how we're going to resist it, which is why I think the Black Lives Matter movement got so much support from the older generation, because people felt like it was time. I mean, we created a hip hop political movement, but it wasn't a mass movement. You know what I mean? And I feel like a part of why we didn't create a mass movement, or we weren't thinking about organizing in a way to create a mass movement, was because we came of age in the shadow of the civil rights and the Black Power.
They hated hip hop. Say it. They hated hip hop. We have people. Our elders were against, you know,
Absolutely.
like a lot of what we were, you know, like trying to use that vehicle to continue that vehicle. You know.
Yeah. But I also think that we were operating in the shadow of such a huge transformative movement, and it was difficult at first for us to imagine a movement that didn't look like those movements. But then we began to do that. And so I think that I guess that's what I mean by these movements. And what I'm seeing now, you know, with some of this implosion of the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, in terms of I just think a series of mistakes. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement often cited the Black Panthers and the Black Power movement as their precedent. But there's so many lessons from those movements to be learned that could have taken them in a better direction. I remember having conversations with Geronimo Pratt, and I did an interview with Geronimo Pratt when he first got out of prison after 27 years. I went out to California and sat down with him in Marin City where he was staying. And at one point we're sitting there talking, and people come up to him trying to get his autograph. And he's like, you know, that's not what we do in our movement. Like, we're not supposed to be celebrities. You know what I'm saying? So like, just that we you know, the moment that we're in America as a society with social media and everybody trying to have a platform and like all of that stuff, I think is diminishing our capacity to organize at the level that we need to.
But why aren't we?
Very quickly, I just want to say, hey, this is Patrick Oliver. I'm on here with Tiffany Fondo. You're on the conversation. We are here with Bakari, Kitwana, author, activist. We're having a discussion about Black History Month. Go ahead, Tiffany. Black Music Month. Black Music Month.
Yes, I was gonna say, I remember hearing someone say, and this blueprint reference you can use it as hip hop or history or whatever, but some of us from our era felt like we weren't handed the blueprint, right, to be able to move forward per se. And I feel that some young people might feel the same way. And it seems like we're continuing this gap of not bridging, ensuring that we're bridging these gaps for some type of continuity.
Yeah. See, I have a jaded sense of that. You know, by the time I finished my senior year of college, my first year of graduate school, I had already spent a lot of been in deep quality conversation with Naeem Akbar, with Hakeem Adabuti, with Maulana Karenga, you know what I mean? And so I feel like I had created a relationship with some of these folks. And then of course, when I went to work at Third World Press, that just only deepened. You know, I spent a lot of time with Paul Coates of Black Classic Press. I edited Francis Cress Welsing's book, The ISIS Papers. I edited Gil Scott-Heron's book, So Far So Good, and spent a lot of time with Gil Scott-Heron. So I feel like because of my relationship with Haki, I got to know people like Sonia Sanchez, Gwendolyn Brooks, Amiri Baraka, Mari Evans. So like, I feel like I had access to all these people. And I also had access to some unknown soldiers who were very active in the Black Power movement. And one of the things that they would say to me is, you don't have to just read this history. These people are still here. Go find them. Go talk to them.
You're an anomaly though. Like I was from the suburbs of Cleveland, yo. Like what? Who is, you know what I mean? Like that's not where hip hop.
There's a brother from Cleveland that was a part of the. What was his name?
Or no, in hip hop it was Silver B, but in terms of politics,
I'm not talking about hip hop. Yeah, I know what you mean.
We had some of the first, the Stokes brothers. We had a lot of stuff going on with in terms of people who were like, you know, like big in history. But like, they were like, do they realize that they were on a pedestal for us? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I'm thinking of Max Stanford. I can't remember what he changed his name, but he was one of the founders of the Revolutionary Action Movement. I mean, these were serious brothers from Cleveland that were deep into the more radical wing of the Black Power movement. And, you know, so that's who I was looking for when I came to Cleveland. And actually, he gave us a lot of feedback when we were organizing the National Hip Hop Political Convention. So, you know, I feel like I've always kind of sought these elders out because many of them are underutilized.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I would say to young people, if any of them are tuning in here, you know, if you're part of the contemporary movements, I mean, you know, reaching out and being in conversation with the elders about these past movements, I think is just an essential part of what we have to do.
Talk a little bit more about your Hakeem Adabuti's, the Third World Press influence on your examination of music, hip hop music, rap music. You know, you did mention a little bit about it kind of was one Hakeem Adabuti, we all know, was a major part of the Black arts movement. So how did that play a role in your nurturing and your analyzing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like when I came to Third World Press and I was working at Third World Press, I mean, I was fascinated to have all this access to our history. I mean, like Haki was such a pivotal figure and he just knew so many people, man. Like I remember one time Haki would tell you to do stuff and you'd be like, man, why has he got me doing this? so one time he's like, I want you to come out to my house on Saturday and I need your help. So I'm like, what does he want me to do? So I get out there, he's pulling all of these books out in his garage. And so he's like, I need you to help me dust these books off. I got all these books. Haki had so many books at the press. He had as many books at home. And so I'm sitting there, we're cleaning these books. This must have taken about 5 or 6 hours. We're going through all these books. He's like, put the duplicates over there. Sometimes he had 4 or 5 duplicates. I remember he gave me a copy of The Choice by Samuel Yet that day. But so I'm going through this stuff. I'm putting these books over here. He's like, you see the duplicates, put them over here. So after that, he goes through the duplicates, pulls one of each copy and gives them to me. So, I mean, that's the type of mentor he was and is. But also, I can remember being at Third World Press, we spent a lot of time looking at who was reading our books. We spent a lot of time researching who was reading these, and a lot of times it wasn't my generation. And so it became clear to me that I had to be where my generation was. And where my generation was hip hop. And what was happening in hip hop in my generation in the written form, the world of ideas, was the Source magazine. And so that, and I remember the person that made that crystal clear to me was Lerone Bennett. Wow. And in Chicago in those days, like we would see like Sam Greenlee, Lerone Bennett, Anderson Thompson, Hannibal Afrique, Jacob Carruthers. I mean, these brothers was just walking around. They were around everywhere. You see them everywhere. Right. You see them at the you see them in Malcolm X Park. You just saw these brothers around. And so one day I'm talking to Lerone and he says to me, I'm asking him about Ebony and his journey with Ebony. And I'm like, and he can tell where I'm going with this. He's like, you need to go wherever your generation is with this, with the writing. And so he said, you don't need to be at Ebony. If it's the source, you need to be at the source. And so that kind of set me on this path to be at the source. So I think that was some of the overlap. But I mean, like watching Haki work and watching the range of the entire Black world that he knew, people all over the world would come to visit Haki from around the world. One of his good friends was Kerapetsi Kogatsili, who was a South African poet laureate. He passed a few years ago. Ironically, he's the father of the rapper Earl Sweatshirt. A lot of people don't know that. He has that poetic pedigree from his father that he brings into his hip hop lyricism. So there's that. And then people like Sterling Plump, who I met, who was really deeply into the blues and stuff. I mean, they just start to give you an appreciation for the intersection of music and knowledge and information and spirituality, and just how we begin to transform our communities and transform and impact our people in a more positive way.
So if young Bakari was walking up to you and was like, I want to write and I want to be on the scene, is it Source? Where is it now? It's online, right?
I don't think it's the Source. I mean, it's funny because I've been thinking about that. It feels like I think there are multiple arenas, but one of the arenas right now is the podcast. And I don't know how that translates to the written word, but it's definitely a gateway, I think, for knowledge. I don't think that we've figured it. I don't think that people figured it out yet. Most of the people that are in the podcasting arena that do hip hop aren't as interested in the written word as a vocation, but they do. I think they see the written word as a place to make more money. So someone like a Charlemagne the God, he does have books. You know what I mean? He is in the podcasting space, but I don't really think that he has seen books as a knowledge system.
Or could he recognize though that he has the power to lead folks to books?
I think he definitely recognized that. I mean, he now also has a book imprint.
Right.
Which they published Tamika Mallory's book, State of Emergency, and I believe they published in another book from, I don't know what else they published, but yeah. So that I think that's something that's happening, but I still think that there's an information gap in terms of, look, the what they were able to accomplish in the Black Power movement was unprecedented for our people in terms of societal transformation. The Black Power movement and the rise of Black studies transformed the entire American college and university system. I mean, absolutely transformed it. Never will be the same again as a result of it. And so I just think that what they were interested and invested in was capturing the history that the documented history of Black folk that had been already written as far back as they could go, and to set us on a path for how to continue to use it into the future. I mean, like, it was just like, and these were young people. Yeah. These were young people. Many of them hadn't even had PhDs yet. So it's just like that power and influence that they recognize, the work that people like that were doing in the activist arena, like Assata Shakur, like Afeni Shakur, like Matulu Shakur, Sekou Odinga, etc. I mean, like, these people were serious. I mentioned Geronimo Pratt. One of the things he talked to me about was when I did that interview with him, he talked to me about Bunchy Carter and Bunchy Carter's ability to transform the Slossons gang into revolutionaries. You know what I'm saying? Like, that stuff is very powerful, and I think it's a period that we have to revisit and not take lightly, and think about what lessons are still there for us now. And I think we're really in a moment in which the consciousness has been raised, yes, and people are looking for information, and we got to figure out, we got a short window of time to figure out how to get it to them. For me, my contribution, where I'm hoping to make this impact, is with this Nipsey Hussle project. The book is called Higher, The Philosophy and Opinions of Nipsey Hussle, and should be out in 2024.
So he has, the thing is, I can tie this to Nipsey Hussle too. So it's great that you're doing that. Nipsey has a beeline to Africa, right? He speak, you know, like, and people aware of this. We're talking about access. We could immediately, through Zoom, Skype, whatever, have this access to Africa and have this tie that we only had through print resources and whoever before. Who's making the connection? I'm just starting to hear folks say we need to have ties to Africa, you know, like 16, you know, like all the you know, like the 1619 project and all that is making us really think about these things, but who's actually bridging that gap to say, look, we have an easier access now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that there are people out there that are talking about it. People like Greg Carr and others. But I still feel that there's a disconnect between the people that have serious resources and serious influence. Like, I feel like it's different now. Like, I feel like when we were coming up, there was a respect for these knowledge centers, and we respected a Black leadership, and there was a Black leadership class in every area of human knowledge, and we would respect and gravitate to those knowledge centers. I feel like now people feel their knowledge centers in and of themselves, and they may not even know as much. Right. They're still willing to, you know, platform themselves, because that's kind of what happens in this, like the social media market is a capitalist market. And I feel like the second that we accept that our future is in capitalism, I think that we're already defeated before we even started. And I feel like that's what's running things now. People talking, even when people are talking about generational wealth, it's really a capitalistic idea that they're really advancing. They're not talking about the people are more important than me as an individual. You know what I'm saying? That's not the orientation. So I feel like it's a lot of work to be done. Even as we're making gains, I feel like we're also taking huge hits. I mean, just think about it. When, let's say it's 1989, 90, 91, you could be in almost any city in the country without social media. And if you knew that Dr. Ben, John Henry Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Francis Cress Welsing, Linda Myers, and others were coming to town for a conference, you knew you had to be there, because you was about to really get hit upside your head with so much knowledge that was going to completely transform your worldview. And I feel like that we don't have that now. And even where we do have it, the most fierce of our intellect is not being lifted up in the way that it was in those days. That to me is where we're losing. You got so many people pushing themselves, pushing their friends, but not pushing our most serious and strongest intellects that are really trying to take us somewhere, and not telling us, get the bag, get the bag, get the bag. I'm so sick of people saying that. They're telling us, they were telling us, you have to be a knowledge center unto yourself if we're going to free ourselves as Black people.
What is your angle for your Nipsey research and your theme?
Wow.
Like, what are you looking at on that one?
How much can I talk about? The Nipsey book, there is a book out on Nipsey Hussle by a writer named Rob Kenner. Ironically, Rob Kenner was the editor of XXL when I was the editor of The Source. Rob Kenner's book does a great job of capturing the what a music history would do. You know what I mean? So he goes through the albums, he goes through the producers, the people who were engaging Nipsey Hussle as an artist. I'm more interested in Nipsey Hussle as a Black man. I'm more interested in Nipsey Hussle as the potential to build Pan-Africanism. I'm more interested in Nipsey Hussle as a person who is advocating Black love, Black family, parenting, and a collective Black economic enterprise between a generation of Black folk who are entertainers, celebrities, athletes, to better use their power beyond themselves. So I mean, like that's what I'm interested in. That's really kind of what and I'm interested in, like, I feel like a lot of what Nipsey Hussle talked about in his lyrics about his story was a self-creation narrative. You know, people always talk about the autobiography of Malcolm X, for example, that Malcolm X told us the story about himself that he wanted us to know, right? I feel like Nipsey Hussle told us the story about himself that he wanted us to know. I feel like the Rob Kenner book lifts that history up. I feel like media has lifted that narrative up. I'm interested in finding the other narratives about Nipsey Hussle that we don't know.
Yeah, create that philosophy and framework. I see that being a way of looking for these young folks to get activated in community.
I think so.
Really making that collective that you were talking about instead of this individual mindset.
It's hard though. It's hard because capitalism is very persuasive. It's very seductive. And everybody wants to live the good life. You know, one of my favorite writers is Vijay Prashad. I was watching him. He's an international studies professor. I was watching him give a talk in which he said, we're not mad at, we don't want to get rid of first class. We just want to we just don't want nobody in second class. We want to get rid of coach. Right. So I think that's an interesting way of thinking about how we upend capitalism. Not so much, you know, everybody got to be in coach, but can we get everybody in first class?
Can you get us there? Bakari, we are up on the 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock hour.
Yes, we are. My goodness.
Yes, it has been a very delightful conversation, very knowledge-based. We appreciate you for what you've done. Uh, anything you want to close us out with? You know, because we are in Black Music Month, but we also, you share with us, and I'm glad we went the direction of the political activism that's associated with Black music. You know, you mentioned people like James Brown, Shaka Khan, and all those songs. You know, people forget about James Brown's songs. I don't want nobody to give me nothing.
They allowed.
You know, open up the
I
door
mean,
like get it myself.
James Brown in many ways is almost like fundamental to hip hop. Like so many artists sampled James Brown, you know, back in those earlier days. So it's fundamental. Other man, I'm just thinking of I feel like we just really scratched the surface. I mean, I wanted to mention that I started an organization with Dave Mays called the Hip Hop Political Education Summit in 2020. We did 2 major virtual summits. One was the Hip Hop Political Education Summit on voter suppression. That was in September of 2020. Then we did the second one in November, the Hip Hop Political Education Summit on Black Men in the Vote. And so we talked about Ice Cube and his agenda for Black America. I remember, was that what it called?
Something in my eye.
Right.
Yeah. And so we talked about a lot of that stuff. And I feel like there was so much, we brought so many personalities in. Dame Dash was a part of it. Brothers from Brand Nubian were a part of it. Professor Griff was a part of it. And so I feel like we got really kind of deep into some of the music, but also really kind of the heart of where people are. But so many books, I feel like, Patrick, man, I feel like I didn't talk about enough books. Wow.
Hang out a little longer.
Yeah. There is a hip hop book on music that I think is fundamental. 2 of them. One is 100 books of the 100 best albums of hip hop written by oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember what his name is now. It's written by Oliver Wang.
Oh yeah.
That's a great book. And the other one I want to mention is a book written by Dan Charnes. Dan Charnes has a new book out on Jay Dilla. I haven't read that yet, but his book on the history of Def Jam. What a powerful book about the history of hip hop through the lens of Def Jam. I think that's must reading for anybody trying to do serious work on hip hop. And your question.
I pulled something from my shelf.
Give her some props on Black feminism and hip hop to this day. She changed my whole mindset. That book changed my whole mindset.
Yes, that's a great book by Joan Morgan's one of my best friends. She also had a book that she put out on Lauryn Hill. Which is a brilliant book. And what was striking about that book to me, Patrick, was the way in which I have never in my life read a book from such a Black woman perspective that it made me realize how many books I read from a male perspective, not realizing the book was written from a male perspective.
Right.
That's one of the genius things that she did with that book. What a brilliant book. 25 years, what is it? 25th, it was on the 20th anniversary of the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. What a brilliant, the book is called She Begat This. Yes. What a brilliant book.
And the aspects of colorism, Black feminism in today's world, like music, all that. Please tell her to come back out. We need her.
Yeah,
she's doing doctoral work. Tell her, come on.
No, she's finished her PhD.
Awesome.
She teaches at NYU and she's very active. I work with a lot with Joan. People are constantly trying to get her to do things, but she's so busy with her work as a professor. She often doesn't have time to do it all, but she's definitely lecturing and she's out there. People want to see her, wanted to come speak. She's out here doing the thing.
I just learned this over this weekend that in terms of voter registration and things like that, we're doing things too late. Like we need to be growing these young folks and growing them in spaces like libraries and things like that so that we can have better access to information like you were saying, and people like you, so what could we do to get folks like you you know, like these kids are hanging in libraries in the summer. That's the cool spot where the air conditioning is. That's where all the music and books and computers are, where they can go and get the beats and all this stuff if it's not on their phones. Like, how can we, you know, like mobilize the library as a space, because it's free, it's open, it has your books, it has the thought.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I know here in Cleveland, and you know, because you were here, the Cleveland Public Library is very aggressive about bringing hip hop artists. I remember RZA was here. RZA was here speaking on his book, the Tao of the Wu, that came out in 2014, I think. Another great book on hip hop by just a brilliant way that he weaves together hip hop history, his spiritual centers of the Shaolin Temple, as well as the 5% Nation, as well as, you know, like a fierce kind of street consciousness. So yeah, I mean, I think that those, I encountered him at a library, you know what I mean? So I think the library definitely should, there's so many artists right now who have books out, like Rick Ross. And I mean, I hope the libraries will bring those guys out. I mean, I think it's definitely a conversation starter. I've done a number of things at libraries with here in Cleveland with Michael Eric Dyson, with some of his works around Tupac and others around hip hop, and some not hip hop. But definitely, I think that's a place to go. And I think if libraries can reimagine the spaces, I mean, reimagine the conversations. It doesn't have to be a hip hop artist one-on-one with, you know, one artist talking about his book. It could be, I did a big program at Harvard with Cornel West. It was me, Cornel West, and Rakim. And they were, and Cornel West added so much richness to the conversation around the history of music. And then him and Rakim kind of went back and forth. So the Dan Charnes book is called The Big Payback. I just remember that.
Yeah, The Big Payback. Well, hey, Bakari, thank you again. I know Tiffany, both of us had a lot more questions we could ask you, but Tiffany got one more question.
Yeah, one more. Can you just give some words of knowledge to these young Black males out here in terms of literacy and political activism that you would like to impart upon them, or something to think about as we move forward in this space?
Man, I mean, I think one of the things that I see a lot of that is frightening to me is the social media space in which capitalism is worshipped. You know, is absolutely worshipped. The get the bag thing is just the smallest part of it, you know. You have so much conversation around these cryptocurrencies and flipping houses and all this stuff. I mean, I think that one of the most important things that we can do is to begin to talk to young people about life. You know what I'm saying? Like gardening, eating right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I'm trying to remember who it was that said to me, like, everything that you do to your body bad in your 20s and 30s is what's going to weigh you down in your 40s and 50s. You know what I'm saying? I think that as a young person, you think you're indispensable, you try, and now we got, you know, you got all these, like, you know, drug options out here today, which is killing, you know, most of us. I just think that the most important thing that we can do is to focus on life and to recognize that capitalism is imploding. This global economy is imploding. It's imploding here. You see it at the gas pump. You see it in their so-called inflation. It's imploding internationally. You got over 40 wars going on, not just Ukraine, 40 wars outside of Ukraine around the world. Many of them are in Africa. And I think that we have to stop chasing these people and their money. It's not the future for Black people.
It sure ain't.
That's a great point. That's a great point, brother. You know, a holistic movement is what you're asking young people to do. Become more centered, and when they're centered, they can be better at analyzing what's happening around them every day. Because, like you said, you're chasing the bag, and chasing this capitalism, false sense of capitalism.
And Patrick, one of the most powerful things about Nipsey Hussle, in my opinion, was his willingness to decide for himself how he was going to think about how he could change the world. What was his strategy for self and community transformation? That's one of the most powerful things about the brother. He defied everything around him and everything that the music industry was saying and said, you know what? My brain that the creator gave me is strong enough to tell me what to do for me. And that's what I'm going to do. That to me is one of the most important messages of Nipsey Hussle that's rarely talked about. And it's all in his music over and over and over and over and over again.
Yes, it's manifesting in Kendrick's work too, as you see. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Kendrick is on some other stuff.
And I didn't have a chance to go there. Didn't have a chance to go there. I wanted to go there.
Let it go. Let it go.
Let it go.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Bakari.
It was our pleasure, brother. Tell them more about the blog, where they can check it out.
Yes. If you are interested in more information about Black males and literacy and political movements and all that stuff, you can visit us at weareherelit.org. We are on Instagram at weareherelit. We are on Twitter at weareherelit. Come see us, share your knowledge. Let's collaborate. Let's talk. Let's get this movement going, because until we are literate in all those aspects, health, finance, all that kind of stuff, where are we? So let's keep the conversation going.
All right. Hey, Bakari, again, thank you so much. And we're out of here. Speakloudly.com. You want to check me out, the stuff I'm doing with young people around the country, around literature. It's all there. All right, everybody. Peace. Have a great evening.
Thank you.